Hey there folks, so at this point we have a character who can walk along, press a button for an input and they do their attack. When they do their attack it obviously does some kind of trace, and you can see here it's hitting multiple of these enemies, and for each one of them it's telling us which enemy is hit. So I'm able to hit all three of these. So let's start having a think about how we can apply damage to these. Now one of the things that we could do is obviously write up some code ourselves that says, let's find out what this thing is and call a piece of functionality, call an event that exists inside of this other element. But actually, inside of Unreal, using our generic actors, there's a whole bunch of functionality we can actually use to do with damage already. And that exists between these two nodes here. We have the apply damage node, and I'm just going to add these in. So we've got apply, and we've got point damage, and we've got another one which is our radial damage, and we've got another one which is our damage with fall off. There we go. So we've got 4 different versions of our apply damage, and then we've also got event damage. We've got any damage, and you can see I've already got one of these connected up because I've already got some damage functionality built into this character, but I'm just going to move it over here just so we can talk about it and use it. So where was it that we were working? Down here. So there's our any damage, and then we've got damage event, we've got our point damage, so I'm just going to put the point damage one underneath the point damage, and then we've got our event damage and our radial damage, and this actually links with both of those. So what we've got here, we've essentially got the ability to send out a message to something to say it has been damaged, and we've got an event that can be called to say we have received damage. And these are really useful because yes, they can communicate a damage amount. You can see every single one of these has base damage, base damage, base damage, base damage. And obviously here we have the damage coming through on the opposite side. So the number that goes in here comes out on the other side from here. So that's great. Obviously we can communicate a damage amount. We can use that for working out how much damage we've taken, modifying our health. But as long as there is a number in here to make this event run, the key thing here is that we are going to talk to the damaged actor. And again, you can see the damaged actor is in here. With the radial, it's a bit different because it's going to hit everything that is within a range. So everything that's in range of this damage radius is going to become the damaged actor. And then that comes through and tells this to run. So we could use this for just a basic communication method. Maybe my character walks up and they use apply damage to pass a message to a switch to tell a door to open and so on. So the functionality we're looking at here to get two things to talk to each other is going to be really reusable across loads of systems that you want to do. Now, what else can we do? Well, if we look at the differences as we go along here, we've got this apply damage. As I said, it tells us which actor is going to be damaged and how much they're going to be damaged by. They are the 2 core most important things that you need to actually set up here. We need to tell the thing that is going to receive the message, and we need to have some kind of number in here because 0 basically won't let you pass that message through. It won't pass through a 0 damage. So even just putting a 1 in here will be sufficient to make the communication work. The event instigator, you can see here, is a controller object reference. And then the damage causer is an actor reference. So there's a lot of things we can start considering here in terms of the complexity of creating this. So for example, the damaged actor, maybe I target and I hit my target dummies here, my ghouls. So I hit the target dummy, hit the ghoul. That's going to be the thing that receives the damage. That's how much damage they're going to receive. The event instigator, as it's a controller reference, that would be representing me, the player. Yeah, so if I was to fire a projectile, it's not actually me, the player, that is hurting them. It's going to be the projectile itself. So it can be useful here to actually differentiate and say, well, this is the thing that hurt you, the grenade, the projectile, the sword, the different things that are actually being used as weapons. And this is the person, the player, that instigated that, the controller. That could be a player controller or an AI controller, because obviously it's just a generic controller object reference. Now, if we go along to the point damage, you can see pretty much the exact same stuff is in here, except we also can feed it some information about the hit from direction. So we can tell it where did the actual hit come from. which can be really useful because obviously, you know, we've got all these things inside of our break hit result, such as the trace start. Yeah, we can know where that actually came from. And obviously as well down here, we've got the sprite and our socket location. So we can use that as the location we've been hit from. And also we've got this hit info, so we can actually make ourselves our own little hit information, or we could just pass the hit data from this for each loop. We could pass this through into the point damage. The radial, very similar to all of those, except that you can see here radial damage with fall off adds a couple of extra options, and they are simply that, you know, this is our base damage that we'll do. This one allows us to basically say, even if you get really far away, if you're really on the far outer radius of this, obviously this has a fall off, so it gets lower and lower the further away from the origin that it's going to be. But we can always say that, you know, this is the minimum. No matter how far away you get, it never goes down to 0. It means that it's always going to be inflicting a certain amount of damage, but it'll be more damage if it's closer to the origin, to the epicenter. We've got the damage radius, which is obviously how far it reaches, and with the fall off, we've got this inner radius, which is basically, you know, your everything within this range takes the full base damage, and then in between the inner radius and the outer radius is where that fall off will happen. And again, that's where we can start using the minimum damage to start controlling that. The fall off exponential is going to be useful for defining how quickly and how much that's going to fall off. And then again, we see all the rest of the same stuff, but we've also got some damage prevention channels as well for if things are getting in the way of that. And little tick box there for just do full damage. Yeah, this can be easy to say that let's not have any fall off on here. Now, point damage and radial damage do have corresponding events for them. You can see that here we can communicate through with this point damage. We can communicate through a whole bunch of stuff. And this is where actually that hit info that you feed into there gets split up into the outputs here. So that's really useful for us because we don't actually need to kind of change it. And there is a little bit of a hit from direction and shot from direction, which, you know, just renaming issues when they're corresponding between them. And you can see damage received. This just tells us, you know, this is the amount of damage you received. It lets these nodes here do the distinction of how much damage is going to be fed through based on inner, outer radius, fall off, minimum damage, and so on. It lets all of this stuff be done on the applying step and then just feeds this through to tell you, hey, this is how much damage you received, but also this is where the origin of that damage was. So, you know, you could just feed through a base damage and just tell it where the origin was if you want to, and let the actual receiver of the damage do all that functionality. Now, something to note out with these is that apply damage is kind of your generic thing, but it misses lots of these extra steps, but it will get triggered by the any damage. Point damage will only get received, this event point damage, by our point damage and by our apply damage. So if you start using radial damage, but then have events for point damage, they're not going to receive this functionality over here. So this is one of those things where you make a decision early on of what kind of communication do you want to use for your damage events. Do you want to go really generic and simple with apply damage and just say, I just need to tell you that you have taken damage and this is how much you've taken? Or do I need to tell you the specific hit from direction of where that damage came from? Or do I need a fall off? If you need one of these, then you're going to have to start communicating and knowing which events to run, because otherwise if you start using some of them and not other ones of them, then obviously you're going to miss that out. And you can have these, you know, radials being triggered onto the any damage, but then you miss out all this extra information. So if you're like, I'd like to communicate the origin, well, the any damage isn't going to bring the origin through for you. So I'll leave that one to you. You make that decision and maybe experiment with these and see which one of these works best in the context of yours. I can't really tell you, you should use fall off and you should use radial for everything, because maybe you don't need that at all. Maybe just knowing that damage has happened is simple enough for your damage and combat system. So how do we get these things to talk to each other? How can we actually apply and use this? Well, let's just take all of these just for one moment. The only one I'm going to need is I'm going to start with my basic apply damage. This prints out the thing that has been hit, and we already know that there's two core important things that we need. We need the damaged actor and we need the base damage. So the damaged actor, well, that's nice and easy. That's going to be the hit actor. That is the thing that my hit result has just registered for me. The base damage, well, that's going to be some kind of number. And I actually have already created a swipe stomp damage effect here, which feeds through the value of 25. So I can actually plug that in. But otherwise, I would recommend that rather than just typing in the number like this, you promote it to a variable, so you've got a value that you can come back to and edit. Because now if I want to go and change the damage amount that this is doing, I just go into this variable list and I go find that number and I tweak it. In the future, different enemies might have their own data assets with these values saved within, and obviously you could just go, let's get the enemy's data and get their damage from that. Now the event instigator, obviously I could just get the controller that is in control of this. The damage causer could obviously be, the fact that this is the widow, or if there's something else extra that going on here, projectiles, weapons and things, we could plug that in. The damage type we'll look at in a future video, but this allows us to communicate more values, more variables, and this would be maybe where it might be useful to just define a damage type and create our own damage types for things like fire, explosives, ice, and all that kind of effects. So hopefully this will then pass a message and apply damage to the target dummy. Now I'm just going to test it and just show you. It's still going to print out, so we'll walk over here and we will hit these guys. They're taking some damage, but we have no idea that they have taken damage. So what I need to do is just get the other half of this. This is the sending element, the applying damage. So now the receiver, I'm just going to get rid of all their nodes there. The receiver needs to have event damage. And you can see if I plug this in and do print string, and maybe we type in here, ouch, you can see that this is going to run when we go and overlap them. When we go and hit them with the primary attack. So we go hit them, and there we go. Each one of them, when they are hit, prints out ouch. You can see all three of them there printed out ouch. So you can see I've got each one of them being hit and each one of them saying ouch. And I can even go and plug the damage in, and we know that the damage, as I've just said, was 25. So what that should mean is each one of these that has been hit will now print out the number 25. So that tells me not only am I communicating from one thing, the damaging element, the attacking element here, the widow, to something else, but I'm also passing a message and communicating a number along to it, which obviously is our damage amount, but that can be used for all sorts. If I wanted this to just be, maybe a number of 1, I could then use this to activate something, to make it explode, to make it move, to remove it from the level. Loads of different things that I could do. So it's worth looking at your designs and thinking, what is it that specifically happens when damage happens? Because that's going to be all the stuff that comes after here. In this instance, we're just using the apply and any damage to have these things communicate. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to prove the point and just show you the event point damage. If I take this and plug this into here, so let's just take this one and trigger it along, what we'll see is if I go along here and hit these, no communication is happening. Yeah, so even though I am hitting them, and even though I'm applying and sending them damage, they are triggering a point damage effect. And because they're triggering the point damage effect, they need the apply point damage event to be the one that's triggering them. Yeah, so this proving the point here that you need to really think which type of apply and receive damage events do you want to use. And if you define those, that's the pairing that you're going to be looking at. Now I can, as I said, use apply point damage. So let's just plug this one in for a moment. Let's have it go and do damaged actor and base damage. So this is going to tell this all the things it needs. Do we need to know anything else? Yes, we need to know the hit from direction. So let's just go with where this came from. Do we need to know anything else? We need to know the hit info. Well, that hit info could just come from our for each loop here. Now it's getting a bit messy, but just to tidy it up, just so you can see it if you screenshot or pause the video. There we go. So that's going to obviously trigger that. Now we need 4 pieces of information for this to work. And now with the point damage, let's just see how that works. We go over here and there you go. It's communicating 25. So if we apply point damage, we can receive point damage. And let's just show it that if we take this one and use the any damage instead, and plug this one in here and press play, and walk along over here and slam, you can see that that's still going to work on the any damage. So apply point damage can be received by any damage and can be received by point damage. But if we apply generic damage or radial damage, then the event point damage isn't going to work. So just make sure you get those paired up. Now that for now is going to be enough to get our two things talking. You make a decision on what type of damage event you want to work with and what type of damage event you want to work to communicate using. And you can see if we do that, we get these two things talking to each other, and that gives us the starting point now to come back to this and start adding in health, hit, death, and everything else to have our enemies, our target dummies, and so on responding to this damage. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing to access more of my Unreal Engine content.